Hello, welcome to the Comic Book Commentary. I'm Bo Leidig, and after seeing his first image appearance in last week's video about Savage Dragon number 2, I figured, why not take a look at his first full issue appearance with Vanguard number 1. So let's zoom in and take a closer look. First published in October of 1993, we can see that this is the fabulous first issue of Vanguard, but this cover, despite already being pretty decent in my opinion, has a little bit of a secret that it's hiding that we're going to take a look at right now. Surprise! It's a fold-out mini poster, which, admittedly, I've said in the past, I'm not a huge fan of the fold-out poster covers, mostly because of the fact that if you ever wanted to hang the poster up, it would require you to rip the cover off of your comic book, which I'm not necessarily a big fan of doing. Though I do appreciate the fact that this cover is only a trifold, which means if you don't want to remove the cover, you can still fold it out and see the entire image. Unlike what we saw with some other books like Shaman's Tears number 2, where it's a full-size poster, that means you have to remove the cover from the book to see the poster even. I don't like that. It kind of stinks, especially for someone like me. I only have one copy of Shaman's Tears number 2. So in order for me to ever see that, I either got to, essentially destroy the one book that I have or find another one and, pay $1 for it. But still, it's just the headache of trying to find another one. And I really appreciate the fact that, Eric Larson and the gang was thinking ahead and saying, all right, let's make it so that people can just fold it out and look at it and not rip the cover off if they don't want to. Co-creator, editor, Eric Larson. Co-creator, writer, Gary Carlson. Penciler, Tom Coker. Inker, Jim Sinclair. Letterer, Chris Eliopoulos. Colorist, Brad Vancata, I think is the way you say that. Corporate Weasel, Josh Eichhorn, hopefully. Josh, I apologize if I got that wrong. We also got an advertisement for Super Patriot and Die Hard round number 2. This is actually part of the Super Patriot miniseries that I'll be getting into probably very close in the next few weeks. Starting to talk about the Super Patriot miniseries. And then we get into the story. So this picks up exactly where we saw it leave off in Savage Dragon number 2, which was also Vanguard number 0, where Vanguard is basically confronted by Supreme, who is wanting to know exactly what Vanguard is doing on this fully operational, weaponized warship so close to Earth. And Vanguard states that he's here to, basically watch over Earth and make sure that it doesn't get attacked. But Supreme's not buying it. And he says that, I've dealt with your people before. His people being the Calyaptin, I believe is the way you're supposed to say that, but there's no pronunciation key, so I am sort of guessing, which is a alien race who has taken it upon themselves to essentially be the protectors of universal freedom across the galaxy, but they don't necessarily go to the trouble of asking people if they want their protection or not. They just kind of give it, and Supreme seems to have a real problem with the idea that the Calyaptins are just kind of imposing their will on, different species and races all across the galaxy without even asking if any of those planets want their help in the first place. After the exchange, Vanguard makes the mistake of asking Supreme exactly what he intends to do to stop him, and Supreme responds by punching him straight in the face. And this, of course, knocks Vanguard for a loop. Supreme is vastly more powerful than he is. Vanguard tries to retaliate using his jet boots to launch a full frontal flying attack. However, this, again, is completely futile as Supreme is, basically invulnerable. He immediately catches Vanguard's fist, then punches him in the face again. However, at this point, Wally interjects and states, yeah, you might have taken out my buddy, but what are you going to do about the rest of us? Which catches Supreme off guard as he states, wait, what? Supreme is then shocked when he sees dozens of Calyaptins appear, all looking the same as Vanguard. And Wally says, time to go, buddy. Like, you need to leave. And Supreme is shocked and can't believe his eyes. But then he quickly realizes and remembers where he's at. And where he's at is in the training simulator on this ship. So he then realizes that all of these other Calyaptans are actually just morphling androids that are supposed to mimic the appearance and size and strength of different alien beings, or whatever beings Wally chooses for that matter, as a means to train with. Unfortunately, they have a very set limit on how powerful they are, and that limit is nowhere near high enough to be any kind of a threat to Supreme, as he immediately lunges into action and quickly disperses of all of them. We see all of the destroyed androids all around the ground, around the bottom of Supreme's feet. And Supreme looks at Wally and says, hey, nice try, but you're going to have to do a lot better than that. You have any last requests? But Wally's like, yeah, I got just one. We then see that Wally says, hey, yeah, my last request is that I wish you'd get the hell out of here, as a ball of energy appears around Supreme and he suddenly disappears. Then we see Wally go over and attend to his friend, making sure that Vanguard is okay. And while he is a little bruised up, he's still all right, as he's been protected by his exosuit. He then gets up and decides that, he wants to figure out more about Supreme, as he's seen his name appear on Earth's news channels. And from what he's, seen on the news, he's always kind of felt that Supreme was a major jerk, and that Supreme definitely lived up to that belief when he showed up here on their ship unannounced. He then starts to talk to Wally and says, that guy said that he had experience with the Calyaptans, and I want to see if there's anything in the memory banks about that. So Wally quickly looks it up and finds out that there's massive files about Supreme when he was actually on their homeworld of, Calyaptus, I believe is the way you're supposed to say it. And that he was there almost 30 years ago. He apparently met up with their people and fought alongside of them for quite some time, until he had a major falling out and disagreement with one General Gronka, and at that point turned on the Calyaptans and started fighting against them. Now, Vanguard isn't too happy to hear about all this and wonders what their next move should be, and he also then asks Wally, hey, so what exactly did you do to him? He's like, oh, I just teleported him out of the ship. And he's like, wait a minute, you just teleported him? He goes, yeah, just teleported him. He's like, you didn't vaporize him, you didn't destroy him, none of that. And Wally's like, no, we don't have those kind of capabilities on this ship. I literally just teleported him away. So Vanguard's like, okay, but where did you teleport him to? As we see the sun and a familiar looking ball of energy appear outside in space, that is likely to be where we find our friend Supreme hiding out. As Supreme reappears in space, he looks over and realizes that Wally teleported him to the opposite side of the sun, which makes him furious, as it only worked because he believed that Wally was going to attack him, so he let his guard down for this kind of a trick. And this is where we learn that despite Vanguard's ship not having enough weaponry or enough powerful weaponry to actually harm Supreme, it does have the ability to prevent Supreme from getting back on. Apparently, the Calyaptans do have shield technology that is so great that Supreme can't break through it. And Supreme knows this. And he realizes that if he's going to do anything about getting Vanguard away from Earth, he's going to have to get back there ASAP before they can get all their shields up. So he realizes that he can't waste time going around the sun and has to take the shortcut directly through it, as he blasts through the sun, leaving a trail of energy behind him. And then we see him in the middle of the sun as he closes his eyes and his mouth. And he does think to himself that, he is in a lot of pain. Like, despite being as powerful as he is, the sun's energy is enough to actually hurt him and cause him severe, just pain and discomfort. And he just tries to focus on that and use it to go faster and get through the sun as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, back on the ship, Vanguard and Wally are still trying to figure out exactly what they're going to do about this. At one point, Vanguard's like, what if we call for backup? And Wally's like, dude, it would take them like 7 days to get here. And he's like, yeah, okay, fine. But then what's your solution? And Wally says, probably to buckle up. And Vanguard's like, what? And he goes, yeah, we got incoming. You need to put some seatbelts on ASAP, as we see Supreme burst through the other side of the sun, screaming as he's still dealing with horrible amounts of pain and is just engulfed in like solar plasma from bursting through the center of the sun. We then see Supreme blast through the middle of Vanguard's ship, screaming as he does so. And this, of course, rocks the whole ship, knocks Vanguard out of his chair. And Wally says, we've just been dive bombed by Supreme. Vanguard's like, how bad is it? However, before he can answer, Supreme once again continues his attack, blasting another hole through the ship, and keeps doing so. Wally states that he's damaging core systems like defensive capabilities, offensive capabilities, their ability to use thrusters in any way, and that, things are looking really bad. Vanguard asks if there's any way he can repair it, and Wally says yes, if he would stop his attack for like 2 seconds. And at this point, Supreme blasts into the control room that they're sitting in and tells Vanguard, like, this is it, man. I'm sending you back home right after I finish dismantling the rest of your ship, as he blasts through one of the walls again. This is not good for Vanguard and Wally, and Vanguard states like he's really mad at this point and he wants Wally to beam him out of the ship. However, at this point, the lights go out, and Wally states that they've lost most of the power of the ship and that he's diverting all the remaining power to life support to try and keep the two of them alive. However, of course, Wally is an android. I'm sure he'd be fine just in outer space. And Vanguard's like, this is it, man. I've had enough of this. We need to do something about this right now before this guy kills us both. As we see Supreme outside of the ship once again, getting ready to press his attack once more. Meanwhile, down on Earth, some NASA scientists have picked up readings of Vanguard's ship, which is now no longer cloaked due to the damage it sustained from Supreme's attacks. One of the scientists uses a nearby observation satellite to point a camera in the direction and realizes that there's a massive warship just above the surface of the Earth. They decide to call out to Youngblood to mobilize a team to get into space and figure out what's going on, until they zoom the camera in and notice that Supreme is already there. They instantly downgrade the alert because, as one of them states, yeah, we don't want to step on Supreme's toes, you know what a hemorrhoid that guy can be, kind of bleeding into the fact that it doesn't seem like a whole lot of people really like Supreme all that much. However, they then try to figure out what exactly he's doing up there. Their first instinct is to believe that he's helping some sort of disabled ship and trying to save them, when they then realize that no, he's actually trying to push the ship away from Earth. At the same time, Vanguard and Wally realize this as well, as Vanguard states, hey, what can we do? And Wally's like, basically nothing, man. I have almost no thrusters and we have no way to steer the ship, as Supreme gives the ship one huge shove, trying to push it back towards their homeworld, as we see it basically almost launch into hyperspace just from him throwing it, which once again kind of goes as an illustration of just how powerful Supreme really is. Vanguard then realizes that they're in big trouble as they're already past Mars within seconds. Wally's doing his best to try and address any repairs he can address, and Vanguard asks if there's anything they can do. Wally states that he's going to try and repair thrusters to the point where they can at least use impulse power to slow the ship down and turn it back towards Earth. However, he states that this is going to take a long time and probably take weeks, if not months, to get back to the planet. Vanguard states we don't have that kind of time, and he tells Wally to use what little power he's got to beam Vanguard back to Supreme's location. And Wally's like, he's going to kill you, right? And Vanguard says, hey, thanks for your concern and all, but don't worry, because I'm going to walk softly and carry this big gun. I'll be okay. We then see Supreme hovering out off the surface of the planet, as he starts to ponder his own, existence in this new world that he's returned to. Keep in mind, he's been away from Earth for like 50 years at this point. And the planet is far different from the one he left. He wonders if he should have maybe stayed away or if coming back was the right move. And he's not sure what he should do going forward. He's really kind of at a crossroads of whether or not he should be Earth's protector anymore, given all the superheroes that are there now, and if Earth even wants him around. However, while he's lost in his own thoughts, we see that Vanguard appears behind him and unleashes a massive attack, hitting Supreme in the back. And this attack actually hurts him, as he actually screams out in pain and is shocked by whatever it is that's just struck him and doesn't know exactly how to respond. As Supreme continues to wail in pain, he thinks to himself, I've got to figure out a way to make this stop. And we then see that Vanguard is also engulfed in some sort of energy and yells out in pain. He then turns around looking at Vanguard and states, you just made a huge mistake. You hurt me in a way I haven't been hurt in a long time, and now you're going to face the consequences. However, Vanguard states, hey, I'm ready. Let's go. I'm ready to do this. I'm tired of you, man. As Supreme launches forward, about to unleash an attack, he's shocked when Vanguard grabs his fist and states, not this time, pal, as he punches Supreme across the face and then backhands him, as we realize that he's actually matching Supreme's strength blow for blow. And this is because the beam that he hit him with wasn't just an attack. It was a way for him to siphon some of Supreme's power into his exosuit, basically making him Supreme's physical equal in the process. Meanwhile, back on Earth, we see one of the NASA scientists walk up to a familiar set of boots, stating, we should probably mobilize Youngblood to get up there and help. However, Sentinel leans out of his chair and says, nah, man, let's not be too hasty. This is just getting good. Once again, kind of signifying that there aren't too many people who really like Supreme, and Sentinel almost seems to be enjoying watching Supreme get roughed up a little bit, as we see Vanguard unleash another attack, which knocks Supreme into the observation satellite. This, of course, is taking the cameras offline that NASA was using to watch the battle. He then tells Supreme, I don't know why you're being such a jerk, man. Like, my only real cardinal sin is that I showed up to your solar system without your permission. And he's got a point there. Like, it wasn't as if he was invading Earth or interacting with Earth in any way. He was just kind of nearby to make sure nothing happened. However, Supreme doesn't seem to believe that that's a reasonable explanation, as he states, you say all these things, but at the end of the day, this is my planet and you're not welcome here, as he lunges forward, preparing to launch another attack. Back on Earth, the scientists still have audio of the fight, which I don't think is real because I'm pretty sure sound doesn't carry in the vacuum of space, but whatever. And they state to get another satellite nearby to get eyes on the battle, as they want to see what's going on. However, back in space, Vanguard is caught from behind by Supreme, who decides to take the battle to the surface of Earth, as he states, why don't we make this a little bit more personal, and I'll show you exactly what it is I'm fighting for, as we see them blast down towards the surface of the Earth at incredible speed. As they race down towards the surface of the Earth, Supreme lets Vanguard go, sending his body flying through the corner of a building, which seems counterproductive if you're really trying to protect the people of Earth, that you would just randomly destroy a building when you didn't need to, just to prove a point against an alien that you're fighting. He then tells Supreme, welcome to Chicago, Illinois. How do you like your visit so far? As we see that he has Vanguard's helmet in his hands. Now, this is important because as Vanguard gets up, he tries to say something back to Supreme. However, he realizes now that he's speaking his native language, and this is because his helmet is what allowed him to not only speak in any language that he encounters, but to understand it as well. Supreme then says, looking for this alien, but then says, or should I say, and then he repeats the same phrase, but this time in whatever language it is that Vanguard speaks, and then starts to tell him, oh, are you surprised that I speak your language? As I stated, I spent plenty of time around your people, as he then breaks Vanguard's helmet in half. And then he tells Vanguard, I wasn't super impressed by anything I saw in your homeworld either, as he raises his hands up to unleash another attack against his foe. As Vanguard slams into a wall after being struck, Supreme states, you should have gone back to your homeworld when you had the chance. Now the problem is, what do I do with you? He looks towards the sky and sees that Vanguard's ship is currently hurtling past Saturn, and realizes that he's going to have to figure out a place on Earth that he can stash this supposed alien invader. He then looks across town and says, oh, that place will do nicely, as he punches Supreme again, knocking him all the way across the city to another part of town. Meanwhile, a reporter by the name of Roxanne Wells is doing an on-location report near a newspaper when suddenly it's all interrupted when Vanguard's body comes flying through the air and crashes into the sign behind her. This knocks her down. As she gets her bearings, she looks up and states, "Supreme, oh my God." And Supreme states, "Sorry for the interruption. I miscalculated on that throw. I'll be getting out of your hair." She, however, not one to break professional courtesies, quickly picks up the microphone and says, "Well, do you have any comments about anything that's going on? Is that an alien that you have? What's happening here?" He simply states no comment and walks off and enters the police precinct. Roxanne, however, is a little bit upset about all of it as she calls him a jerk, but then she looks down and sees something that she's never seen before. And of course, this is Vanguard's helmet, which I don't know why Supreme would have still had that on his person at this point, but he did. And she picks it up and states, "I'm going to figure something out and do what I can to repair this thing. And I'm going to get my story one way or another," as she seems to be really kind of pissed off at the fact that Supreme just blew her off. Supreme then walks into the police station and asks the officers if they have a level 12 security cell, which they of course do, given the fact that they constantly have to deal with members of the Vicious Circle. He then throws Vanguard's unconscious body at the foot of the officer's desk and says, "Good, lock him up in it and throw away the key. Also, you're going to have a whole lot easier time dealing with him if you can peel that suit he's wearing off." He then goes to leave out the window, and the officer states, "Well, wait a minute, when are you going to be back for this guy?" And Supreme says, "Never. I don't care if you ever let him out. I'm done with this guy," as he flies off, leaving Vanguard alone on an alien world without his helmet, which means he has no way to either understand or communicate with any of the people holding him captive. And we realize that Vanguard's in a really sticky situation. We then get to fan cards where Eric kind of gives a rundown about everything that happened in the past with Vanguard. Vanguard actually made his very first appearance in Megaton all the way back in 1982. Of course, at this point, Megaton doesn't really exist anymore, except for the rare occasions where Eric Larson will put out an issue of Megaton randomly. And he states that, of course, with Megaton failing, Vanguard kind of got put on the back burner. But they made some significant changes to the character, not necessarily in his look and his overall backstory, but the original comic dealt a lot with him dealing with the USSR and communism and stuff like that. And it was kind of impossible to try and roll all that into the story that we saw in this issue. So he basically decided to just start fresh with the character and work him into the Savage Dragon story. But as a little bit of a bonus, he decided to include the original Vanguard story in the back of this issue and also color it for the very first time, which we're going to look at right now. We then see that in the very first appearance ever of Vanguard back in Megaton, Vanguard is in a similar predicament where he's on a spaceship, kind of being charged with guarding the Earth while his homeworld is engaged in intergalactic war, and he's actually just bored out of his skull watching what he refers to as a backwards planet. And that if it was not for Earth's television, he'd be going stir-crazy right now. He then tells Wally, "Hey, let's go watch Gilligan's Island," when suddenly there's a large bulge in the floor and a horrible sound as a giant Soviet robot just bursts into his spaceship and presses an attack that catches him and Wally both off guard. Meanwhile, on the surface of the Earth in Moscow, we find out that the Soviets have discovered Vanguard's ship and believe that it's actually an American spy vessel. One of the men tells his commanding officer that it seems to be an alien on the ship, but his CO is not willing to accept this and states, "No, this has got to be a plot by the Americans," and that the Cosmos 7 robot is designed for purely defensive purposes, and we're going to use it to eliminate this American threat, tell it to attack. So the robot immediately attacks Vanguard, punching him in the face, unleashing an optic blast, and Vanguard dodges, countering with his own attack, swinging, missing, but then punching the robot. And as he goes in for another attack, the robot catches his fist midair, which Vanguard was not expecting, and then hurls him through the side of the spaceship towards the surface of the Earth, showing that the robot itself is actually pretty powerful and definitely more than a match for Vanguard. we see that Vanguard hurls from the spaceship all the way down to the surface of the planet, crashing through a building, destroying another building from the base, and the Cosmos 7 robot immediately follows and sees Vanguard lying in a crater and says, "I'm the Cosmos 7 American, and I want you dead." He then picks up Vanguard and throws him down the street, smashing him into cars, and following up with a tackling attack, smashing Vanguard into the ground once again, punching him in the head, and then exclaiming, "Well, I can't believe you're still alive." And then Vanguard, as he's being picked up by the Cosmos 7, "Oh, I'm alive, and I'm alive and a lot more than that." Then Vanguard exclaims, "I'm also mad as hell," as he brings both of his fists together, smashing the head of the Cosmos 7 robot, destroying it instantly. At this point, Wally appears and says, "Hey, you did it." And Vanguard's like, "Yeah, no thanks to you." Wally responds by saying, "Well, listen, I had to finish repairing the ship before I came down. Not to mention, you seem to be able to do everything without my help." He then tells Vanguard, "You look just as good as the green guy on the monitor," which I'm pretty sure is in reference to the Savage Dragon. And Vanguard says, "Hey, thanks, Wally." Meanwhile, back in Moscow, the Soviet commander is convinced now, after the robot was destroyed, that this is indeed a plot by the Americans, and that space station must be destroyed, as we see that this is the beginning. Not to be continued, because as I stated before, Eric said that he didn't really feel like there was any way he could competently work this story into the backstory of the the 1993 current iteration of Vanguard, and decided to just scrap all of this backstory, but he wanted to let everyone have a chance to read it for themselves. And on the reverse inside cover, we get an advertisement for Supreme. At the time I'm recording this video, I've only recorded a video on Supreme #1, but if you want to know more about Supreme, you can check out my video on Supreme #1. And that was Vanguard #1. Overall, I feel like this is a pretty fun read. It's not doing anything to reinvent the wheel, but it does give us a lot of context about Vanguard and why he's, here near planet Earth, and also gives us a little bit more backstory into Supreme's past, talking about the relationship that Supreme had with Vanguard's homeworld, and also gives us more of a contextual look at the way that the rest of Earth is starting to view Supreme. And that, there's a lot of, tension and not necessarily animosity, but Supreme is kind of starting to wear thin on the patience of a lot of people in the Earth sphere and in Earth's governments and other superheroes. And, I like the idea that they brought in the idea of Supreme questioning why he came back to Earth in the first place and what his role is now on the planet that he left so many decades ago. I also really like the idea of, Vanguard's ship being launched back into the deep reaches of space, and then Vanguard being imprisoned on Earth with no way of him being able to communicate with any of his jailers, which puts him in a really dark predicament and place where, he's not able to free himself. He's not able to even talk to or understand anyone that's holding him. It's taking a character who, by and large, didn't really do anything all that wrong and putting them in a really desperate situation, which is a really cool and unique way, I think, to start off the story for a brand new character. But then again, these are just my opinions. Your opinions may be completely different. You might hate this story. You might think that, nothing special was done about Supreme's story. And if that's the case, it's okay, because everyone's entitled to their own opinions. If you enjoyed today's video, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And thanks for stopping by. Have a great day.